WeCrochet and welcome to this tutorial about my herringbone moss stitch hat. It has matching mittens and will have a matching sweater to come soon, and it comes in sizes from child through to adult. So I'll pop all the information below as to where you can find the pattern, and we're going to make the child size today, so let's get cracking. So the yarn that I chose to use for the hat is Swish DK from WeCrochet, and I've got it here in Squirrel Heather. It's a beautiful yarn to work with, and I have made mittens out of this, sweaters, hats, all sorts of different things. It's a beautiful yarn to use. The amount that you'll need is in the description below for the size that you're going to make. You'll also need a needle for your ends, a pair of scissors, and a 4.5mm or G+ crochet hook, or the hook that will meet the gauge for the pattern. So the first thing we need to do is make the rib, the bottom rib of the hat that sits around your head. And we're going to do that with a slip stitch rib. So we're going to pop a slip knot on the hook, and then check in the pattern for the size that you're making, but we're making the child size here today. So we're going to chain 12. And then we work back along those 12, but starting in the second chain from the hook. We're going to work a slip stitch in each of them, but I like to work them into the back bumps of the foundation chain, but do whatever suits you, whatever feels best for you. So just slip stitch into each of those. And you'll find that the first few rows, because there's not much to hold onto here, are really tricky. Once you've got past the first few rows, you'll be absolutely fine, but just stick with it. It's really fiddly. If you're finding it really tight and really difficult, you'll probably find that you'll need to go up a hook size for the rib. So just have an experiment and see what works for you. And that's our first row completed. And now we're going to turn. So for row 2 and each subsequent row of the rib, we are going to begin by chaining 1, and then we're going to look for the back loop of each of our stitches. So here we have a front loop and a back loop. It's probably easier to see further along the row than that first one. So here's a front loop and here's a back loop. So we're going to aim for the back loop of each of them, and we're going to pop a slip stitch into each stitch. So we want to have 11 stitches for the size that we're making. And you're just going to work along, popping a slip stitch into each of those. And again, this is tricky while there's not much to hold on to, but the longer your rib gets, the easier it will become. And here we are at the last stitch, and so we just pop a slip stitch into that last one. And then my top tip would be, I know that lots of people chain before they turn, but for this rib I would turn and turn it on itself, turn it in that direction, flip it over and then chain, and that kind of gives you a much neater edge, a much neater finish, and then you're ready to go again with your next row of slip stitch in the back loop only. And so the pattern will tell you how many rows of this you need to do for your size. So go ahead and find out how many rows you need to do, and then get those worked, and then pop back and we'll be ready to join them and make it into a band and work the top of the hat together. So once you've completed all the rows that you need to for your size of hat, we are ready to join this together and make it into the band that's going to be at the bottom of your hat. So as you see, once you've got to your last row, you're going to make sure you've got the right amount of rows. That's the first thing before we join it. And then we are going to line it up like this so that your stitches match up. And then what I suggest you do, you can join directly from this last row to the first row, but I found a different way, a better way of making your seam look neater. So if you feel up to it, go for this version. And what we're going to do is not join in the last row, we're going to join in the penultimate row, so the row before the last one. So we're going to aim for this row here. So it's quite hard to see in slip stitches, and you might find that you need to tease them apart to get hold of the stitch and pull it up there, because we need to be on the loop there for that. And then we need to pop our hook into that stitch there, and then we're going to go across to the first, well, it was the chain that we began with over here. And so you're going to end up joining those with a slip stitch so that it joins the band together, and that will make the seam invisible from the other side. This is going to be the wrong side. And then we pop through the next one, but remember, not on that last row, on the row before. And once you start, it will become really obvious where they are. And we slip stitch in there. And then we work along, just joining with a slip stitch. But essentially, as long as you're consistent with where you put your stitches in each one, it will look nice and neat. So don't worry too much. Just get these stitches joined, and that will be your band ready. Here we have the last stitch to join. And then once you've done that seam, you're ready to flip it. Now make sure that you have got your working tail facing away from you so it doesn't get tangled up. And then just literally flip it inside out, and you'll see you have that beautiful seam there that you can barely see. And now we're ready to start working in rounds and going around the edges of these stitches to form the hat. So for round one of the body of the hat, we're essentially going to put a stitch into every other side of a row. And these are really good because you can kind of see the direction that they're running in. So we're going to pop a stitch into the side of each that goes down in this direction, and then we're going to pop a chain one and skip the row in between. Now hopefully it'll become clear as we go along. So we start by chaining one, and then looking at the sides of these rows, we've got like these obvious ridges. And so we're going to work a stitch into each of the ridges that we can see, because that's every other row. And then we're going to put a chain one and skip the ones in between, and we'll fill those in later. So we begin with this first one. We're going to work a herringbone half double crochet in the side of this row here. So that's our first stitch. And then we're going to chain one, and we're going to skip the side of this next row. And then we're going to pop another herringbone half double crochet in the side of the next row. You're going to chain one, you're going to skip the side of the next row, which is tucked right down here anyway. And then you're going to look for the next ridge, and you're going to pop a herringbone half double crochet in there. You're going to chain one, you're going to skip the next one that's hidden down here, and you're going to pop a stitch into the next ridge that you come to. And you just carry on all the way around like this. And what you should end up with when you get back to the start here is a stitch allotted per row that you had. So you need either a stitch in the side of a row or a chain one and skip a row. So for this size, I did 90 rows, so I will end up with 90 stitches. And here we are now, just at the very end and we're going to pop a stitch in there, we're going to chain one, and then to complete the round we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch to join. And that's the end of round one. So when you've done that, I would just go back around and just have a count up. Make sure you've got the right number of stitches that the pattern tells you for the size that you're making, and then we're ready to work round two. Round two is going to begin with a chain two. Now that chain two counts as a chain, and then also a chain one space for the next round, and you'll see why we need that in a minute. And then what we're going to do, we're going to skip that first stitch because we need to leave a space over the top of it for the moss stitch to work. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a herringbone half double crochet right down into the side of the cuff, so the row that we skipped on the side of the cuff. So that looks like this. You're going to stretch right over the top and pop it down into the cuff here, and then complete your herringbone stitch there. And it sits just over the top of that chain one you see there and into that gap. And then we're going to chain one and then skip one, so that's the stitch from the round below, and then we're going to work a herringbone half double crochet into the side of the row that we skipped, so down into this next one. So you're just working around filling in the gaps basically here, and then you're going to chain one and you're going to skip one, and then you're going to find that side of the row that we skipped down here in the cuff and work a herringbone half double crochet in that one. And you just carry on all the way around until you get back to your first stitch again, which is obviously your chain two, and then we're going to slip stitch in that to join, just like we are going to for every round now. And here we are, right at the very end, and we're going to just pop a stitch down into that last side of a row, and then we're ready to slip stitch into that chain two that we began with. And that's round two complete. And you'll see that it is all sorts of wibbly wobbly at the moment, and that's because we've got the stitches here are now wider than the band here, and that's as it should be, because what we want this band to do is stretch, which it will very nicely over your head, and then you'll still have the fullness of the stitches on the top of the hat. So for round three, we're going to begin with a chain one, and then what we need to look for is not this chain one space here, but underneath it, the stitch 2 rounds below. We're going to go for the back loop only of that stitch. So not this front loop here, this back loop here. So I do have another video of me doing this in chunkier yarn, so that might be worth a watch if you're struggling to figure out where to pop your stitch. But we're doing a herringbone half double crochet into there. And then you're going to chain one, you're going to skip this next stitch, and then you're going to aim, that one's easier to see, isn't it? 2 rounds below the back loop only of that stitch there. And then we chain one, we skip one, and then you work your herringbone half double crochet into the back loop only 2 rounds below, which is kind of a moss stitch kind of look, isn't it? Or linen stitch. People call it all sorts of things, don't they? We've chained one, we've skipped one, and then we work into the back loop 2 rounds below, working over the top of that chain one space. So that's what the back of your work should look like. And so you just carry on doing that all the way around. And then when we get back to the beginning, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first stitch. And so here we are at the end of round 3, and we're going to pop our last stitch there and then chain one and then slip stitch into the first one to join. And that's our end of round 3. So round 4 is the last round that we need to learn, and it's really similar to round 2. So happy days, we're nearly there. We're going to chain 2, and then we're going to skip that first one that's directly underneath us, and then we're going to work our moss stitch, so our herringbone half double crochet moss stitch. I have to think about it every time I say it. And we're going to do that into the back loop only of the stitch 2 below. So we're going to pop that in there, and then we are off. We're going to chain one, we're going to skip one, and then we're going to work our moss stitch into the next.
and you just need to repeat that all the way around. So you see both of the rows are similar because now rounds 3 and rounds 4 are going to form the set pattern for us. So all we're now going to do once we finish round 4 is keep repeating rounds 3 and 4 for as many times as the pattern tells us, and that will give us the main height of the hat. And then at the end we just have a few rounds that are decreasing and pulling the size of the hat in by decreasing the number of stitches. So the rest of the hat is actually really plain sailing once you get the knack of these 2 rounds. So at the end of round 4, just as we've done before, you're going to slip stitch into the first stitch, which will be a chain 2 to join, and then you'll just carry on repeating as the pattern tells you rounds 3 and rounds 4, and they will give you, as I say, the height of the hat. And the other thing is, if you're making this for yourself or for someone that you can try it on, then do try it on, because there are only a few decrease rounds at the top, so the height of your hat is pretty much what this will be. So if you want more or less rounds, then go for it. Just do what fits you best and you feel most comfortable with. If you want to make it nice and slouchy, then add some more rounds. If you want to make it nice and tight to your head, then decrease and have less rounds. The only thing that you need to bear in mind is that you need to finish on a round 4. So you need to finish on a round that looks like the one that we're doing now. So go ahead and do that. Work your hat to the height that you would like it to be before we start to decrease, and then I will see you back here and we'll finish off together.
So now that we've worked all the rounds that we need to for the height of your hat, we're ready to decrease here at the top and pull it all in together and finish. So when you have worked the amount of rows that the pattern tells you, or to the height that you'd like your hat to be, you see there's the cuff down the bottom, we can begin round 1 of the decrease section. And the way that we do that is to chain 1, and what we're going to do now is decrease a stitch. So we're going to do, it's a great big mouthful of a herringbone half double crochet moss 2 together, which you don't need to worry about what it's called. Let's just work it together. So we're going to begin a moss stitch that we have been working the whole way through. So we'll pop our hook down into there and pop through, and then as we would normally yarn over and finish the stitch, we're not going to do that. We're going to completely miss this next stitch here, and then we're going to start a new moss stitch into this next one here. So what we're going to do is decrease by working these together. So we then start the stitch there, and then we've got 3 loops on the hook, and then we're going to yarn over and go through all of them to complete it. So that's how we decrease a stitch in these rounds. And then the following part of this round is going to be to chain 1, skip 1, and then work just a single normal moss stitch into the next one. And then we chain 1 and we skip 1, and then we're going to do a decrease over the next stitches. So there's our decrease. And then we chain 1, we skip 1, and we work 1. So now we've got a stitch repeat of 4 to remember. And now we decrease. And you see it's going to really pinch the top of the hat in and pull it really nicely to a lovely shape. So we just carry on around doing this, decreasing, and then chain 1, work, skip 1, and then work 1, and then chain 1. So those 4 stitches we repeat all the way around, and then you slip stitch in the first to join back again. And there we are at the end of the round, and we're ready to slip stitch to join. And now our second round of the decreasing is exactly what we've been working before. We're not going to decrease at all in this round. So we're going to begin with a chain 2, and then we'll skip the one that's underneath us, and then we'll just work as we normally would with the moss stitch, chain 1, skip 1, and then the moss stitch.
chain one, skip one, but be careful because that's now a decrease stitch, so it is just a bit wider, so it's very easy to lose track of where you are here. But no decreasing in numbers for this round, just work it completely straight. And then again, slip stitch in your first stitch to join. Here we are back at the beginning of the round, and we slip stitch into that chain two to join. So for round 3 of the decrease, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to moss stitch 2 together straight away. So remember, we skip that in the middle there, don't worry about that at all, and just work those 2 stitches over the top of it. And then we're going to chain 1, we're going to skip this next one, and then we're going to do another decrease. So we only need to remember 2 stitches now. We're going to decrease and chain 1 and skip 1. We're going to decrease and chain 1 and skip 1. And you'll find it really tucks in the top of this hat now. But just be really careful not to let your stitches get too loose. Keep a good tension on them. And so for our final decrease round, we are going to chain 1, and then we're going to join each set of 2 stitches together. But we don't want any more chain spaces because we're not going any higher. So in the first stitch, we're going to begin a single crochet, and then we're going to start to work and then complete the whole thing with a moss stitch down in this stitch here, working over this chain 1 as we always have been. So we start a herringbone moss stitch there, and then we've got 3 loops on the hook, and we're going to yarn over and complete. So that's joined 2 stitches down into 1. And then we're going to repeat that again. We'll start a single crochet in the next, and then continue and do our moss stitch together there. And so we just continue that all the way around the hat until you get back to the first stitch, and then we're going to slip stitch to join. And now here we are at the last stitches, and we're going to slip stitch into our first to join. And so we're now ready to break our yarn, but I would leave a good length, because if you want to add a pom-pom to the top of your hat, you might need that to sew the pom-pom on, or your button, or your snapper, or whatever you choose to use. So the last thing we need to do then is weave in our ends and add a bit to the top if we'd like to. So to complete the hat, we just need to close this top and then add a pom-pom if you'd like to. So we've just thread our needle and then pull it through so that the wrong side is now facing you. And then what we will do is we will just sew to gather up the top of the hat here. So there's you can do it however you like really, but the way I do it is to run with the stitches and just go through each at the top here, so that then when you pull it, it gathers the whole thing nice and evenly. But however you want to do it is absolutely fine, of course. But obviously, if you want to leave it open, you could use it as a messy bun hat. That would look quite nice, I think. So yeah, go around as many times as you like and pull tight. And if you're not adding a pom-pom, then just weave in your ends and finish here. But if you are going to add a pom-pom, then you can either sew your button or your snapper or just your pom-pom on now by threading your needle back through the top and then attaching it there. And there we have them. As you can see, I've made a few in different sizes. The pattern comes from baby through to adult sizes. So go make yourself a cute little hat and come and show me them. Come and let me know what you make. I'd love to see them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.